Hello, everybody, and welcome to the session. In the interest of time, we're going to jump in and get started. So I'd like to welcome Chelsea Cohen from FullStory to the stage. Chelsea.
Hi, thank you, Ani. So thanks for coming to this session. My name is Chelsea, and I lead recruiting operations at FullStory. FullStory is a digital experience intelligence platform that empowers businesses to continuously improve the digital customer experience across websites and mobile apps. We were founded in 2014, and we adopted Greenhouse as our applicant tracking system several years ago. When I first started working with FullStory, we had around 60 employees, give or take, and now we have more than 250. We have learned a lot along the way, and I'm really excited to share some of these learnings with you today. Today, I'll be talking about FullStory's journey from a recruiting black box to a data-driven recruiting engine. In describing our journey, I'll discuss the 3 key performance indicators, or KPIs, that we find most valuable, the 3 reports and the technology that enables them that provide critical insights into these KPIs, and how we use technology to streamline and share out these reports. And my hope is that you'll come away from this session with useful tips on how to foster an appreciation for data integrity on your team and how you can leverage easy-to-use analytics resources to generate valuable insights and predictions that will help your team effectively grow your organization. Now, recruiting reports are useless if you do not have data integrity. So I wanted to take a moment to share FullStory's journey to data integrity. So though we adopted Greenhouse as our applicant tracking system several years ago, we did not initially take the time to set it up or use it in a way that enabled us to capture consistent data. For example, we didn't schedule interviews through our ATS, and many of our jobs had entirely distinct hiring processes and unique interview stage names. And this was okay until we entered hyper-growth mode after closing our Series C. At that point, FullStory leaders and our board wanted to know the answers to important questions like, what is our average onsite to offer ratio? Where are our hires coming from? What is our average response rate when sourcing? Or even basic questions like, how many interviews did we conduct so far this quarter? And perhaps most importantly, are we on track to meeting our hiring goals? To be able to answer these questions, we realized we had to get serious about data integrity. So we made the shift to having all interviews scheduled through our ATS, standardizing our interview process and interview stage names, customizing rejection reasons, assigning relevant jobs to agencies so all their candidate submissions would be captured in the ATS, and requiring all profiles to have a candidate source. Once data integrity became ingrained as a team norm, we were ready to start pulling reports to answer our questions. But Greenhouse reports were not as intuitive as we had hoped. They had limited filtering capabilities and required pulling and cobbling together several reports in order to answer our questions. And at the end of the day, reporting solely through Greenhouse was time-consuming and somewhat limiting, especially when we did not, and we still do not, have a dedicated people analytics resource. So one day we had heard about this tool called GEM, and we signed up for a demo. And originally we thought that this tool could help us with automating and scaling our candidate sourcing efforts. However, we also discovered that the tool offers analytics functionality that could also enhance our reporting efforts and our overall hiring process efficiency. So you're going to hear a lot more about GEM throughout this presentation. I'm sure you've already heard a lot about GEM over the entirety of this Talent Summit. But before I go deeper into GEM's analytics functionality, I wanted to first touch upon key performance indicators. So once we were in a better place with data integrity, we were able to home in on the KPIs we needed to focus on in order to answer the earlier questions that I mentioned. So to maintain a holistic view of our recruiting efforts, there are really 4 core KPIs that we now review on a regular basis. Time to hire. How quickly are successful candidates moving through our process, right? Speed is important, especially in this competitive market. And slow candidacies are indicative of potentially misaligned hiring teams, ineffective hiring managers, or ineffective recruiters. Candidate channel performance. Which channels are performing best and bringing the strongest talent into our pipeline and supplying our hires ultimately. Knowing this enables us to optimize those channels so that we can boost recruiting efficiency. Then there's funnel effectiveness or pass-through rates or stage-to-stage ratios. It can go by different names. But essentially, this is how efficiently are candidates getting through your process. And it's great to look at it by department, by role, gender, ethnicity, and so on. So how many on-site interviews did it take to get to one offer? Knowing all of this enables you to spot and address troublesome bottlenecks in your searches. So for example, unrealistic take-home challenges that might be weeding out too many candidates or biases in the process. And lastly, offer acceptance rates. How compelling and competitive are your offers? Getting a candidate to offer stage requires an investment of time and money, and we really want to know that our offers are going to be as competitive as possible while also being fair. So what are the reports that generate our KPIs and keep our recruiting engine humming? There are 3 core reports that we leverage regularly. First, pipeline analytics. This is a highly customizable GEM report that reveals hiring volume and efficiency, showing both pass-through rates as well as time and stage. It's a powerful and flexible report that ultimately informs 3 out of our 4 core KPIs. It informs time to hire, channel performance, and funnel effectiveness. We also use GEM's talent pipeline functionality. This report is set up as a Kanban board for every job. It has useful color coding that indicates which candidates need some form of action and presents a visually accessible view of our entire active pipeline. It's a great resource to help talent acquisition leaders stay in the loop with hiring activity on the ground, and it's also a go-to resource for our recruiters and our recruiting coordinators to help them keep on top of their active pipelines. Lastly, the offer activity report in Greenhouse. We do still leverage Greenhouse for a number of our reports, including their native offer activity report. It's easy to pull, it's easy to read, and it's easy to share as a standalone report. So I'm going to touch upon each of these reports, starting with our main reporting powerhouse, which is GEM's Pipeline Analytics report. So Pipeline Analytics in GEM has 2 views. There's the pipeline view or the activity view. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the pipeline funnel view. The funnel view shows the efficiency of your candidate funnel in terms of pass-through rates and speed, essentially informing your funnel effectiveness KPI. Some of the features that I love about this report are that you can filter instantly by role, department, source, rejection reason, gender, ethnicity, recruiter, hiring manager, any kind of custom fields that you've built into your ATS, and more. The report also enables you to drill down on certain cohorts to identify potential hotspots where bias, process issues, or misaligned hiring teams might need to be addressed. And then the time and stage feature shows you time to hire data, so where you might have bottlenecks, where there's room to speed up your process, and so on. Now, this screenshot really doesn't do this report justice, so I thought I would take a moment to give a quick demo. So let me pull that up here. Okay. So say you're working on a search. Say we're working on a search for our people operations team, and we want to get some historic benchmarks to compare this quarter's hiring data to. So to do that, I might pull a pipeline analytics report in GEM. And in this demo here, you can see that I have pulled it for all time in terms of the time frame, and I have filtered it to just look at our people and places department here. Now, note that I could also group the data in other ways as well. So right now, it's kind of showing overarching data for the people and places department, but I could break it down by recruiter, by specific job, by hiring manager, and so on and so forth. But for this purpose, we're just going to look at the overarching data. And now here you can see it's showing us pass-through rates from stage to stage, starting with preliminary recruiter screen. And in looking at this, you might say, our pass-through rate from preliminary recruiter screen to challenge stage seems a little bit low. You can then dive into that a little bit. You can break it down, for example, by source type to dig deeper and see if any sources in particular might have been causing most of the noise during this time frame. So we're going to break it down by source type here. And now here you can see that third-party boards had a pass-through rate of 20% from recruiter screen to initial interview. So what you can do is you can then take this information and you can connect with the recruiters on your team to potentially help them revisit some of their job postings. Perhaps there are improvements that they could make to keywords that they're including in the job descriptions. Or maybe there are certain job boards that we might want to stop posting to and more niche third-party job boards that we want to start posting to. Or perhaps before taking any action, you want to compare the performance from this same source to other departments and kind of get a point of comparison as to how third-party boards perform in other departments, for example. Now, this report so far has shown pass-through rate information, but what if we want to be able to compare time to hire data for this quarter with our historic benchmarks? So I would shift from the pass-through rate view to the time and stage view. I'm going to go back to clean this up a little bit here. And so here you can see on average for this particular time frame how many days candidates who were hired or rejected, how long it took them to get through each of those stages in the process. So gathering these insights, as you saw, really only took seconds and can really generate valuable insights to inform process improvements. So I'm going to switch us back to the slides here. So moving on. So one additional helpful feature of the pipeline efficiency view of GEM's pipeline analytics product is the pipeline forecasting button. This is a quick way to gather hiring ratios and to share those ratios with your hiring teams. So here's a quick example of how this feature works. We're going to go back over to our demo here. So you can see there's this little calculator button down here. I'm going to click on that calculator button. And here you can see that it basically runs these calculations for you. So you can see how many on-site interviews it would take you to get to an offer, how many initial interviews, how many recruiter screens, and so on. So consider this workflow. It's in the middle of the quarter, and you need to give business leaders an estimate for how likely their team is to close the business's open roles by the end of the quarter. So here's how we've used GEM's pipeline analytics report and pipeline forecasting functionality to shed some light on this. We start with pipeline forecasting to gather those historic hiring ratios. Next, we take a look at how much interview activity has taken place over the past several weeks for our open roles. And as I mentioned earlier, GEM's pipeline analytics functionality also has an interview activity report so that you can easily pull that interviewing activity data. And since we know our ratios from the pipeline funnel report, we can easily estimate whether we are on target to meeting our hiring goals based on how many initial and late stage interviews have already taken place or are scheduled to take place. So if we see that there's not enough activity taking place for certain roles or departments, we can then drill down within the pipeline funnel report for the current quarter to analyze pass-through rates broken down further by rejection reasons to really try to understand where there might be misalignments or bottlenecks that might need to be addressed to get us up to speed to actually meeting those expected ratios. So by allowing us to quickly gather historic benchmarks and to view current activity and pass-through rate data, GEM's pipeline analytics reports ultimately enable us to proactively set stakeholder expectations, whether that's giving hiring teams at the start of a search a sense for how many interviews they can expect to do, as well as how long the search may take, or giving business leaders proactive updates on how likely the recruiting team is to meeting its hiring goals. But say you want to drill down even further and understand in the current moment exactly what the active candidate pipeline looks like. Are all candidates scheduled who need to be? Is anyone falling through the cracks? Are recruiters taking quick action on next steps after interview feedback has been submitted? If you tried to do this in Greenhouse, you would find that there is currently not really an at-a-glance resource to track all active candidates and to visually see what actions are required for each of them. So because of this, every recruiter and recruiting coordinator on our team used to maintain manual candidate trackers and spreadsheets outside of ATS. The candidate tracker in the spreadsheet might be very familiar to many of you listening in today. And as you know, this requires time to update and maintain. However, once we adopted GEM, we were able to retire those manual trackers because GEM's talent pipeline report made a wonderful replacement and with no manual labor on our part other than maintaining accurate data in our ATS. So as you can see from this slide, the visual layout and color coding of GEM's pipeline report makes it easy to quickly get a sense for where candidates in any search stand. So if a candidate has a green indication here, it suggests that interviews are all scheduled or they're in progress. If you see yellow, it means we're awaiting some kind of feedback. If we've been awaiting scorecard feedback for a long time, it turns red. And so there, that red indicates that some kind of decision is needed or action is required, scheduling might be needed, and we've been waiting for that scorecard feedback for more than 48 hours. So though this specific report is not directly tied to high-level KPIs, GEM's talent pipeline does support your KPIs because it serves as a great resource for day-to-day insights into the active pipeline and enables the team to keep searches humming along. Now, I imagine by now, it may seem as if we only use GEM's reporting and analytics functionality for everything. But as I mentioned earlier, we still do leverage Greenhouse's reports on occasion. And in particular, I just wanted to give an example of one such report. So Greenhouse's offer activity report shows how many offers have been extended, accepted, or rejected, as well as how many are still outstanding and the overall acceptance rate. So you can pull a report for any time frame that you prefer, and you can filter it by department, recruiter, or hiring manager. And so not only is it useful for tracking acceptance rates, but it can also help teams to keep an eye on those outstanding offers so that they can, team leads can partner with recruiters on ways to strategize on how to close those offers. So ultimately, the data in this report feeds into our offer acceptance rate KPI, which we review on a weekly basis. So reviewing reports like GEM's Talent Pipeline Report or the Greenhouse Offer Activity Report can risk falling on the back burner, especially with how many things talent acquisition leaders are juggling these days. So how can we keep these reports easily accessible and top of mind? So at FullStory, we have set up automated reports using the tool where everyone already spends much of their time, Slack. So we've set up recruiting leadership reports Slack channels. These are privately shared channels with the head of our team as well as our line managers. And within each channel, we've set up automated Slack reminders that send messages containing the hyperlinks to the 3 GEM reports that I mentioned earlier, as well as to the Greenhouse Offer Activity Report on a regular cadence. And so long as our team maintains data integrity, our saved reports will provide up-to-date insights that we can easily access and review through these automated reporting Slack reminders. So my hope for you all is that you can think about ways that you can potentially leverage the tools at your disposal to make reporting more easily accessible and easier for your talent acquisition leaders to access on a regular basis. So what have we achieved through all this? So since we have consistently started using these reports to regularly focus on our core KPIs, we have been closing jobs faster, partly because the data that gets surfaced shows when hotspots have arisen in our process and where we can proactively address certain things and improve certain things. Our offer acceptance rates have consistently been at or above industry benchmarks. We've been meeting our recruiting goals related to DE&I, and our recruiters are equipped with really at their fingertips up-to-date reports that they can leverage for sharing data-driven updates with their hiring managers. And this really ultimately, for me, is the most exciting part because it really enables our recruiters to be true business partners and advisors to their stakeholders. So while FullStory's journey on the data analytics path is continuing to evolve and we have a ways to go, I hope this presentation does provide you with some insights on the importance of creating team norms around data integrity and some ways that you can use technology like GEM to gather and share recruiting metrics that inform your KPIs and ultimately improve your hiring process to facilitate your organization's growth. So thank you so much for listening. If you want to learn more about what we're up to at FullStory and our career opportunities, please visit fullstory.com/careers. And if you'd like to chat more about all things recruiting technology and data and process and programs, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Oh, and I think you're still muted.
Whoops, you got me there. Thank you, Chelsea. That was super exciting, and I'm glad to hear how your talent acquisition teams are using data to drive real results. It's really awesome. I did have a few questions I'd love to kind of probe your mind on if you have some time.
Yeah, sure.
Great. So, one thing I was kind of curious as I was listening to is how do you see these reports support partnerships with your hiring managers? What kind of responses do you typically get when you share the kind of reports you were talking about with them?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, it really has empowered our recruiters to share a lot more valuable information with our hiring managers, right? So, we've gotten really great responses from our hiring managers. I will say we tend to select what we share. Typically we'll take some kind of screenshot or something. FullStorians are really into data, and sometimes if we share all the data, they can go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So sometimes we have to, pick and choose exactly what we're sharing with them. But it has proven really helpful. It's something that our team leads. They will share out relevant data to their main stakeholders at least on a monthly basis. We as a team also will be reviewing all of these screenshots and charts on at least a quarterly basis, and sometimes mid-quarterly as well. So it's really opened up a lot of communication channels between the hiring managers and the recruiters, and it's empowered the recruiters a lot. I think also, I was just going to mention too that we include the ratios that I was describing, in terms of our historic pass-through rate ratios on our interviewer and hiring manager training decks as well. And we highlight that when we're training up new interviewers and new hiring managers. So really from the start, even before they've gotten deep in the weeds of interviewing, they have a sense for, okay, I'm in engineering. Here's how many on-site interviews it takes to get to an offer, and how many hiring manager interviews it takes to get to an offer, so that even before the search commences, they have a general concept of what's involved behind the scenes for every offer.
Got it. That's super helpful. One thing that you mentioned is that you've been able to close candidates faster, in part due to the data that's helping you identify these bottlenecks. I was wondering if you had any top of mind examples of some of the bottlenecks that you discovered with this analytics tool, and what did you do to remove or potentially alleviate them in the process?
Yeah, well, two examples that come to mind. Well, first, as far as hiring speed goes, one of the greatest things that we've done recently was we set SLAs for ourselves in terms of how quickly we're going to review resumes that come in, and we tried as hard as we can to stick to them. And using the time and stage functionality in GEM, we're able to measure how we're doing, right? Because it's one thing to set an SLA and be like, oh, that's great, that's our SLA. But it's another thing to be actively measuring it and tracking it and seeing how it's going, and for it to be very transparent for the entire team, right? So that has really helped encourage us and kind of keep us motivated to meet that SLA, and that has in part contributed to our increase in hiring speed, or I should say our decrease in hiring speed. And in terms of bottlenecks, like one other specific example where this has come in handy, we were getting some qualitative data with one of our searches in particular, where it seemed like more often than usual, candidates were dropping out at the take-home challenge stage. And this was just kind of, like recruiting coordinator was noticing it, recruiter was noticing it. And then we were able to go into GEM and pull the actual quantitative data that showed that, yes, indeed, candidates are, there's a lower pass-through rate than we would usually expect for that stage. And we were able to filter by rejection reason and kind of get a better sense of what was going on. And we were able to take that data to the hiring manager and kind of reconfigure the challenge, make it more streamlined, make it more easily digestible by our candidates. And that fixed the issue at the end of the day.
Got it. Yeah, it's always great when data can validate your gut feeling, right? I just had a couple of other questions. You mentioned how you let the interviewers and the hiring managers, before they interview a candidate, already kind of have a sense of what the expectations are in terms of how many candidates they might have to go through, and what, we're seeing in terms of how many people will get to the next stage. Just curious, do you typically use industry benchmarks when you're kind of evaluating how your progress is going along? Are there internal ones you use? Is it kind of a mixture? What's your process when thinking about how do you define what good looks like?
Yeah. Well, we'll see if I don't know if you can hear my dog, but my dog might want to help answer this question.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we do use a mix. I would say for the most part, we more heavily weight our own internal benchmarks, because while external benchmarks are helpful, we have our own idea of what is success internally. And so we do always hold ourselves accountable to our own internal benchmarks. I'd say where we mostly use external benchmarks is when it comes to offer acceptance rate. And that is just really helpful from a competitive intelligence standpoint to be able to understand, are our offer acceptance rates are we something different and something wonky compared to the rest of the industry. And for that, we've mostly relied on some data that we've received from GEM in terms of kind of average offer acceptance rate for tech companies of our size. And then also Greenhouse provides some of that data to us as well.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. And then, one last question, just because I'm really curious about this one too. You're talking about trying to make talent acquisition a strategic business partner, especially for these different departments. And, I'm curious, when you're going through like the metrics that you're sharing, whether it's, on those Slack channels that are automated or pushed, are there any particular metrics or analyses that you find that senior leaders or executives particularly care about when it comes to reporting on recruiting performance?
Oh, well, there I feel like it's often all about our, what percent have we filled to our target goal, right? So that's always a really important one for them. But we also care about a lot of other things, and we'll report on a regular basis on a lot of other factors to our executive team as well. We'll typically break down how hiring is going by department area, because it's sometimes apples and oranges, right? There are different nuances for different departments, but I think that's really the big one, right? Is percent to goal.
Yeah, right. Are we doing it or are we not?
Right.
I get you. Well, I think we're all about out of time right now. So again, thank you, Chelsea, for taking your time to share your story, and thank you to the audience for being here.